Welcome to Women Don't Do That, where we empower you with inspiration, knowledge, and skills to redefine your boundaries and unleash your potential. I'm Stephanie Mitton, founder and CEO of Beacon North Strategies and your guide. Small town girl turned CEO while navigating career, motherhood, ADHD, and chronic migraines. Our conversations range from interviews with visionary women to solo episodes filled with actionable insights. We are your hub for turning what ifs into let's go. Are you ready to redefine your possible? Let's get started. Today on Women Don't Do That, I am talking with Olympian Cynthia Appiah, a Canadian bobsleigh pilot who represented Canada in a number of Olympics. After serving as an Olympic alternate in 2018, she nearly walked away from the sport. Instead, she moved into the driver's seat and rebuilt her career as a pilot. We are talking about disappointment, agency, starting over, giving back, jeopardy, and her favorite motto, every storm eventually runs out of rain. This is a can't miss episode for advice for your everyday life, for work. You will be inspired. Check it out. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here. One of the things that we like to kick things off with is getting to know our guests better. So, what does life look like for you right now?
Right now, life is starting to pick back up again after the Olympics. I took some time off, about 8 weeks, just to decompress and chill. Our sport is very much on the go, go, go. And so, whenever you get a chance to just relax and do nothing, I certainly take full advantage of it. But now we're starting to train again and getting ready for the next season. Which will look a little different than what I'm used to from the sounds of it, having spoken to our administrative staff. But I'm really excited to see what the future holds.
That sounds very exciting. When you chill, like, does that literally, like, watching Netflix, going for walks, are you going on vacations? Like, what does that look like?
It's a bit of everything. So definitely vacation, which is something I didn't do for the longest time. It wasn't until maybe 4 years ago that I went on my
Mm,
first real vacation. I went to Mexico again this year. Actually went to go visit a friend of mine who lives down there. And it was just like a nice week of sunshine and nice weather. I mean, I left at the perfect time because Toronto was still going through that weird cold spell. And
yes.
so I was just like, yeah, I'm hopping on a plane. I'm getting out of here. And so, yeah, it was great to have that. But most of the time, it's just me sitting on the couch watching YouTube or whatever subscription service I've got going on and watching just shows honestly absent-mindedly.
Yes.
There are some shows that I really need to get back into just so I can finish out those series. But a lot of the times it's just like, okay, I need some background noise just to not think about anything and sit on my couch.
Yes. Well, good for you. It's so true. If you're go, go, go and you never get to do that, you're like, I need this. My body needs it. I just need to be
Hmm.
mindless.
Yeah.
I like what you said about the weather. I don't know what it was about this winter, but I feel like Canadians, like, it was, normally we're like, oh, spring, great. But I felt like everybody was like elated. Like you opened your door and it was sunny. Everybody was outside and everybody's like, hi, hi, like just so
Yeah.
happy. It was funny.
Yeah. I got like feedback from or like I was checking in with my sisters during the winter. So this year was a very not typical winter for me where I didn't come home for Christmas. Usually we
Mm,
do. But it was just such a tight turnaround, and it just made no sense. So I stayed in Europe and I would call in. I talked to my sisters almost daily, and they were like, it's so cold. It's been snowing nonstop, which we don't typically get in
yes,
Toronto.
Toronto was colder than normal.
It's colder than
Hmm.
normal, and we got more snow than normal. And so when we got those like random days of plus 10, plus 15, even yesterday was plus 20, people go insane because it's just like
Yeah.
they've been cooped up for so long, and we know the
Yes.
psychological effects of when you're inside in the winter and seasonal affective depression happens.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't blame people for going out and taking
No.
advantage of the sun because we're so deprived of vitamin D and just even warmth. And so that was me these last few days where it's like it's been nice. Let me get outside so I'm not pigeonholed inside my apartment.
Yes, exactly. Oh, that's great. So another question we like to ask to get to know people better is what motivates you to live your best life?
What motivates me to live my best life is just knowing the untapped potential that I haven't
Mm.
reached yet. I've seen how successful I've been so far, and I think that spurs me even further to be like, okay, how much further can we push this envelope? And can I use that as a stepping stone towards something else? And so
Mm.
I think that self-motivation has been built over the years of like having lived with my parents who, they moved to from Ghana to Canada and basically set up a new life in a new world, never
Mm-hmm.
seen snow before, in a new climate. And so seeing that motivation, I think, those are lessons learned that
Mm-hmm.
you don't really learn in a classroom setting, you learn on the go. And I think
Yes.
that has built a lot of that, self-motivation of I can chase what I want, and so I'm going to
Yes.
do it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when you unpack like the story of immigrants and the statistics, like statistically, they are entrepreneurs and start more businesses. Like they are the drivers in large part of the economy
Yeah.
because of these businesses and the resilience and because they don't have the chance to not succeed. Like they have to.
That's pretty much it. There is no safety net when you move from a completely different country into a new system of living, a
Hmm.
new
Granny and grandpa aren't
culture.
there to back you up.
Exactly. And so you might get lucky. My parents were lucky in that there was a small burgeoning Ghanaian Canadian community
Yes.
building, but they were part of that kind of like beginning phase of Ghanaians coming to Canada as well.
Hmm.
So they kind of built into that fabric that was being established.
Hmm.
But that safety net is not the same thing as mom and pop going to save you or grandma and grandpa
Yes.
are going to come in and save you. It's like we can rely on each other as best as we can, but we also have to take care of our own. And so you really have to succeed. There is no failure. Failure
Hmm.
means you have to go back and set up again in your country that may have changed and evolved while you were away.
Hmm. When you talk about, your childhood and your parents coming here and like what they've built and how that impacted your story. Like when you started, I think you were doing some projects that would have supported you financially to do them in sport. And then, you're in the Olympics. Can you unpack a little bit of that journey?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Toronto. I grew up in Toronto community housing. At that time, it was under a different title. But my parents didn't really have a lot to provide my siblings and I with the typical Canadian experience. You hear of, kids playing hockey or they're playing rec soccer. That did not exist for us. And
Mm,
so my introduction into sport or organized sport came through intramurals that my elementary school
mm,
put on together during lunch break or lunch recess.
mm-hmm,
And then that moved into a program that the Toronto Community Housing had with the Toronto Blue Jays.
mm,
And what that included was in the summertime, on Thursdays, the all the kids from Toronto Community Housing of a certain age, we'd all go down to Riverdale Park and we'd play baseball all day,
mm,
during the summer. And I think that kind of that was my first introduction into sport where I really enjoyed the competitive nature of it, the camaraderie of being with other people who are there for a common goal. And so I think I started to slowly chase that feeling.
mm.
And then, you get back into school where you have somewhat structured teams. Your school faces another school in sports. And I used that as a vehicle to get myself into high school track and field. And that became the launch pad
Mm,
to essentially the career that I have now. I was able to go to university and compete in track and field. I went to York University for 5 years. And I don't know if I would have followed that pathway had I
mm,
not gone through the process of basically begging my parents to let me play a sport, them saying no, and then me being determined enough to figure it out and
yes.
find the yes that I was looking for.
Yeah, I feel like it's so important that schools do maintain the school sports because it gives so many people an opportunity because people get left out.
Yeah,
And it really does teach a lot of skill sets. Some of the sports in particular are very expensive. And
yeah.
so, we have some supports in Canada for things like that, but not enough.
Hmm.
And just how important it is. People often think of it as an extra, but it really defines character, and look at your talent that has come out of that, right? And what you're doing with your life. And it's amazing.
Yeah, I will always support extracurricular activities regardless
Hmm.
of whether it's sport, it's art, it's culture, whatever it is, because A, it builds a well-rounded individual, but there's just so many more benefits you get from like using sport as the current lens that we're talking about here. It builds time management skills, it builds discipline, it also builds
Yes.
being able to work with people that you may not necessarily get along with, but you have a
Yes.
common goal that you need to achieve. These are things that you can't teach in a classroom setting. These are things that are taught on the playground, on the
Yes.
field of play. And I've been very fortunate in that I've been able to parlay that into a career. But even if
Hmm.
I didn't, the benefits of physical movement and how it contributes to a healthy populace,
Oh
that's
yeah.
one thing. And then
Mentally and physically, like,
exactly, there's just so many benefits with sport. And so whenever I hear that sport is becoming more inaccessible or unaccessible, it's becoming more
hmm.
cost prohibitive, it breaks my heart because sport should never be there should never be a barrier to sport, and entry into sport should be as accessible as it can possibly be.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. One of the things we talked about as we were preparing for this is also the racial bias in sports. So can you talk a little bit about your experience?
Yes, and so it's very interesting because some racial bias is so hard to describe at times because it's not black and
Mm,
white. It is very much the gray of racism that is hard to define, but once you experience it, once you know it,
mm,
you know it's there and you know what it is. And I would say throughout my career, especially as I moved towards bobsleigh and into the winter sports scheme or stream, it kind of started to creep up, and you hear
mm,
remnants of it. You hear rumblings from either teammates, former teammates, even athletes from other nations that are in your sport. And it's so insidious because
mm.
there are people that are there and they're not malicious about it, but the impact still remains the same, regardless of what their intent was. And it's so hard to weed out because for some reason, like again, because it's hard to describe and hard to define, you're kind of like,
Yes.
well, how do I weed something out that someone may not realize they're doing? And
Hmm.
like for me, my I think my biggest instance with that was probably like the 2018 Olympic team and feeling like there was a reason why I wasn't named as a racing athlete. I was named as an
Mm.
alternate for those games. And to this day, I've never been given a solid reason. It's kind of like one of those, well, it's this, and well, it could also be that. And whenever you come back with a point to um, basically counterpoint what they're saying, then they move to another point as to, oh, well, it's actually this. Okay, well, here's the reason why that doesn't make sense. Okay, well, now it's actually this. And it's like,
Yes.
okay, now you're beating around the bush of what the actual issue is. And I don't like disingenuous people. And
Hmm.
when I was confronted with my 2018 experience, I didn't want to believe that it was a racial
Mm,
there was a racial component to it. And I'm not saying that that was a sole factor as to why I wasn't named to that Olympic team. There were other variables, but former teammates and current teammates pulled me aside and they're like, "This is part of the reason why." Like
mm.
like it's. I know you don't want to believe it, but like this is part of the reason. And it took me a long time to come to terms that like, oh my goodness, this is it. Because like at the time, I was the one of the fastest athletes on the team. I was the strongest team by bar none. No one could out squat me. No one could out power clean me. I pushed one of the fastest times that the program had seen. I was winning races, I was winning medals, and yet I found myself on the outside looking in for athletes who, on paper and on field of play, were not matching up to the level of sport that I was bringing.
Yes, you're like, I know I'm more qualified. Like this, the data
Exactly.
is there.
The data is there.
Yeah.
And for me, sometimes I'm very much a logical person where I'm like, especially in a sport like bobsleigh where it's either you are faster or you're not. There's no in ambiguity, right? It's very black and white sport. When I see the data presented in front of me and you see the data in front of you
Hmm.
and you're trying to find subjectivity in something that should be objective,
Hmm.
it opens many questions as to, okay, well, what is the narrative you're trying to tell me right here?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Cynthia, I'm so sorry that that happened to you. It makes me so mad. Like, especially when like there's data around. It's like you can't really argue with this, guys. Like it's very obvious what's happening.
Exactly.
I was telling you before the interview, like I own like an advocacy and lobbying company, and injustice is something that just really gets at me. I'm like, this is not okay. This
Yeah.
is, and I feel like more and more it seems to be, especially online, that people feel they're being more honest about their thoughts about and racism, right? And so it's out in
Hmm.
the open, and you hear people sharing it and saying it, and you're like, what? Like this was never okay, and it's certainly not okay now.
Hmm.
And yet they're saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah. And it's kind of scary, especially in this modern world where, social media allows you to have a bit of a wall and a mask to put
Mm,
on and express these like racist comments. And sometimes it is robots, it is bots that are
yes.
there to like feed the algorithm and feed that discontent. But some people do genuinely believe these things and they feel like they can take that mask off now.
Yeah, especially because the
And
bots are like
they're feeding into
reinforcing.
exactly, they're pushing
Yeah.
that content out further and further. And it's so frustrating because it's like, I know the Canada that I live in, and I know the people around
Mm.
me, at least if to my face, they act a certain way, and I don't think they would ever say it. I think they still feel the ramifications if they did try to say it to my face. They know quite quickly the consequences will be felt. But it's so weird to kind of go into the digital world and not know what you're going to be met with. Are you going to be
Mhm.
met with people who are, for the most part, sane individuals who are able to have dialogue that is conducive and constructive, or are you going to be there with people who are there to rage bait and kind
Right.
of stew this negative sentiment because it drives content and it pays dollars?
Right. Do you also find differences in your sport in terms of how they treat like male and female teams as well?
Sometimes, I mean, it's gotten a lot better, I will say. I've been in the sport for 11 years now, or I've been on the national team for 11 years. I've been in the sport for longer. And where the sport was when I first started to where it is now, I will say there has been incremental changes that have
Mm.
been made. We still have a long way to go.
Hmm.
There's still a level of disrespect towards the women's category.
Hmm.
After 2018, the women tried to lobby for a second event. At the time, women only competed in two in bobsleigh. The men competed in four men and two men. And we lobbied that we should have a second event and that second event should be for women. And so and when I say we, I mean Canada, USA, and Romania. We were the three teams really pushing and spearheading this initiative. We competed in four women races against the men because that was the only avenue we had to compete. So we would enter ourselves into the men's races. We knew we'd fall behind just because weight and pushing ability and strength. Obviously, there's a discrepancy between men and women, but we just did it to showcase that this was an alternative that was viable for us. Prior to us showcasing our talents, the officials were like, "Well, it's too difficult. It's dangerous. You guys can't do this." And I'm like, we're already in the sport
Oh
doing
my
two
God.
women. What do you mean we know the inherent danger. It's a winter sport. I
I,
like other than curling, there isn't a winter sport out there that isn't dangerous.
uh,
But we pushed forward and we forged ahead, and the IOC agreed that we needed a second event, but they left it to our international federation to decide what that second event would be. So we lobbied for it, and then we heard nothing, and then boom, we get a second event, but it's monobob, which isn't an event that we had lobbied. It wasn't an event that we necessarily had been trained for. And part of the reasoning that they gave was, well, we think it's dangerous for women to do for women. So we want them to do monobob. And we're like, are you
Cynthia.
insane? I know. And the funny thing is like the monobob is actually way harder to
Is
drive.
monobob one person?
It's one person in the
Okay.
sled, so you're pushing and you're driving yourself as the athlete. And one of the reasons why we advocated for four women was we saw the men and the men's team camaraderie that was built.
Mm,
You really see that team aspect, and then monobob is the complete opposite of that, where it's
yeah.
one person getting all the light and the limelight and the glory, but there's still people behind the scenes that you don't see that are helping
Yeah.
prepare that sled get to the line. Anyways, long story short, we didn't get it. We're in monobob now. And now the movement's kind of died for four women to be an event. And
Right.
almost every
Well, people
coach that
get
I've talked to,
tired of it too, right? Like
well,
how, like,
yeah.
geez, it makes me think, I don't really know if this is true, but I saw this video about the Boston Marathon and women and how they
Hmm.
thought that women just couldn't run that far.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what?
They thought our uteruses would fall out, and like the first woman who entered, I believe it was the Boston Marathon. Could have been, yeah, it was the Boston Marathon. The first woman to enter, a woman by the name of Kate Swisher. She entered with just her initials because she knew she entered as a woman, she'd get kicked
Mm,
out, and then she
yes.
hid and then ran, and they almost kicked her off the course because
Hmm.
they legitimately were like, no women are allowed. This is dangerous for you guys. But you have men trying to police women's bodies about what we can and cannot do as if we don't know
Don't
what we're
know. Yeah,
capable
we don't
of.
know. Hmm.
And you still see some remnants of that of, you know, I say this with a caveat. Women's monobob actually is the now more exciting event to watch.
Hmm.
And a lot of coaches have come around and have said, they still do believe four women should be an event, but because of the ambiguity of who can win each race week, monobob is now the event that they prefer watching versus
Ah.
four women and two men and two women where due to now I'm getting into technical stuff, but the sleds aren't standardized in those three events, whereas monobob the sleds are standardized, so it allows
Ah.
for more variability in the standings and race finishing, whereas sled technology is basically almost killed our sport where the team with
Mm.
the most money can buy the best sled, build the best sled, and it's a foregone conclusion who's going to win each
Oh,
race weekend. And so now
interesting.
the sport's not fun anymore.
Right.
So
Oh.
it's funny because monobob, yes, is a great sport. It's given me the career that I have right now. I still do wish that four women were a thing, and I think it's going to be something after my time because we're butting heads with old school mentality and the
Right.
old boys club.
Yeah, I have been so disappointed. I have a 15-year-old girl and a 12-year-old girl, and how pervasive it still is. Like, so my daughter plays basketball, and like the girls' uniforms are always like the second, or they'll be like, there's this special training, we're bringing this special trainer, but it's not for the girls
Yeah.
and like all kinds of things. And then this made me so mad. Last weekend they had Eastern Ontario Championships
Hmm.
and they added boys teams to the boys Eastern Ontario Championships and they took all the refs and then they told the girls their tournament was going to be canceled and they would maybe have it after provincials, which makes no sense because there wasn't enough refs. So they pushed back. They did get them to change it, but like obviously it's a fight. The guy's like, I had to work
Yeah.
12 hours to get refs. I'm like, so
That's not my
12 hours, that's
problem. Yeah.
it? For you to make a basketball championship happens, it happens every year, and that the
Yeah.
boys also get. Like, it's
It's
insane.
it's honestly it's so frustrating. And then you hear of school programs cutting their women's programming versus the
Yeah.
men's programming because the men bring more money. And it's like that sounds like a laziness thing on you that you didn't do what you need to do to promote the women's side of the sport. I
Yes.
just saw an article the other day of the university that Alona Mar went to,
Yes.
yes, is cutting their women's rugby program, but keeping the men's distance cross country program. And I'm not saying that's to slight cross country.
Yeah.
I think you should keep both programs or find a way to, if you have to cut costs, or sorry, make cost cutting measures, that it affects both programs equally and that you're not just cutting out a clearly
Yes.
a strong program. Like one of your most famous rugby players of all time came from
Yes.
this program.
And
Why would you
also,
cut
I was
that?
like, do you know Ilona Mar? Because it's not going to go over well.
Oh, she's already made it well known. It's
Oh,
all over
yeah.
her
I
social
was like,
media. Like, yeah, I'm like, that's the worst person you probably could have upset.
exactly. Like,
So,
what have you done?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's mind-boggling to me sometimes the things where I'm like, this is still happening, right? Like, it's like
yeah.
we should be past some of this. Let's talk more about the actual sport work that you're doing. And you've been in multiple Olympics, you've earned, World Cup podiums and all kinds of things like that. So lots of accomplishments. What is your moment from your sport career that you're most proud of?
Honestly, there's multiple. I think the first one that I always go back to is the year going into that 2018 season. So it's the 2016, 2017 season. Last race of the season was in Pyeongchang, South Korea, and this was going to be the test event for the Olympic Games the next year. And I had been paired up with a development pilot, so up and coming, still trying to, get her footing in the sport. She was a very great pilot. Her name is Alicia Olson now. At the time, Alicia Risling. And we got paired up together, and we were just like, listen, we're going to push the fastest we're going to push, and we're going to have a great time, and we're going to demolish the field. You go in with always all the confidence of the world. And by the end of that race, we finished in third place. It was her first ever World Cup medal. We had beaten the reigning two-time Olympic champion, who also happened to be our teammate. And no one expected that kind of performance.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I was just watching that race a couple of days ago, and the joy I had on my face, and we were so excited because I think more than anything, it wasn't even just beating our teammate. It was the fact that we had just won a medal together. No one had any expectations for us. She drove
The
so
underdog
well. It's
story.
that underdog
Yeah.
story. And for me, it was just like, again, proving some of the doubters wrong.
Hmm. Hmm.
There was like I had been sliding with one particular pilot that season, and as we were getting towards World Championships, the decision was made to not slide me with her, and I was just like, "This is going to be the worst mistake you've ever made. I'm going to make you regret not having me in the back of your sled for World Championships." Um, she went on to win the silver medal that year, so obviously it was a nothing, no consequence to her. But I was able to bring that development pilot, because I had also been paired up with her for World Championships as well, to sixth place, which again, for a
Wow.
development pilot, you're beating well experienced athletes who, on a bad day should be finishing in the top six. And we were able to eke our way into that. And I think it helped me love the sport as to what he can do.
Hmm.
You can really rise up to the occasion when given the chance. So
Yes.
that's definitely one moment. And another moment, and I think this probably tops this Korea one. So in 2021, we're getting ready for World Championships. They're in Altenburg, Germany, very small town right by the Czech border in Eastern Germany. And it is the hardest track, arguably one of the hardest tracks in our sport. It's got this weird aura of fear behind it. And the coaches
Mm.
were like, hey, this is where you're going to go to World Championships as a pilot for the first time. And I'm like, okay, we're up for the challenge. Weeks prior to getting there, I'd been there for a training camp. I was crashing. I think I had a 50% crash rate. Every other run, I was crashing, and I was just down in the dumps. For some reason, the coaches decided to pick me as the third sled. We qualified three sleds. Two sleds were our more established pilots, and I was the third option to go in. So I was like, okay, we're going to go in there without expectations, just have fun. In the sport of bobsleigh, you have to have two successful runs during the qualifying period or the training week to then qualify for the race weekend. And I had made my first run down, and then I had crashed the next four runs after that. So I had this last run to make it, or I was not going to qualify for World Championships. And I was just like, my coaches have spent all this time and money on me. I've spent time and money on myself. I'm going to crash out and not even be able to compete at World Championships. And the medical doctor at the track was trying to urge my coach to pull me out. And he was like, she's not going to get it. I don't think, yeah, he was just like, she's
No,
not.
you didn't.
Yeah. And so the coach in question, her name is Elfia. I love her because she went to bat for me, and she basically cussed this guy out and was like, you don't talk about my athlete. You don't know what she's doing. She's gonna make it down. How dare you, like, second guess her and question her abilities as a pilot? And I didn't know this at the time, but I found out afterwards. So I go down for my sixth and final run. I literally have one last chance to make it down, and I made it by the skin of my teeth. I didn't crash, and I
Ooh.
qualified for the race. And I breathed the biggest sigh of relief. And all the girls in the change room were there. Like, apparently, I found this out afterwards. They were all there cheering me on, hoping I'd make it. And when I made it, apparently there was like a huge uproar.
Ah,
Afterwards, one of the athletes from Belgium came up to me and she said, I think the reason why you're crashing is because your runner setup is incorrect. So the runners are the blades that we put underneath our sleds. One of the athletes from Belgium came up to me. We were staying at the same hotel. A lot of teams stay at the same hotel. And so she's like, come by our garage. I think I have some runners you can use for the race if you want. And I was just like, absolutely. I only had what I had available. I literally had one set of runners. And so she came, so I went to her garage. She let me borrow these runners. I said, how much do you want? She's like, honestly, don't worry about it. I just want you to make sure you get down because we're all concerned about how many times you've crashed.
oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, so I took those runners and I put them on and I went on to finish in fifth place at World Championships. My
Amazing.
and honestly, I say this story because it highlights a little bit of that womanhood of like we all take care of
Yes.
each other, and that's what bobsleigh is. There's always going to be rivalries, there's always going to be people you don't get along, but at the end of the day, we are always there for each other and we all want each other to succeed and we're always helping each other, whether it's providing tips, asking questions. Like I've had people ask me questions about lines on a track. I've asked people about lines on a track. What setup should I use? And that's the little quiet part about sport that a lot of people don't hear about because they just see,
Hmm.
oh, you must be rivals with this athlete and you must hate that person. I'm like, no, like when we're in a competitive setting, we're there to compete.
Yes.
Off the field of play, though, why am I in a competitive setting? We're friends. We get along with each other. And so
Yes, you can still be human.
he can still be human. And so
Yeah.
I love that story because it highlights that, but it also highlights the not give up attitude because
Yes.
I could have basically said, you know what, I've crashed 4 times in a row. I'm probably going to crash this fifth time and not qualify. Let me pack it in. But I didn't. It could be part of the stubbornness that is inbred in my head. But I think also it's just like that determination of fighting to the very end and it's not over till it's over. I'm
Hmm.
glad I never at any point in time doubted myself that I knew what I could do. And yeah, and here we are.
That's amazing. I love that story so much. And like you said, it unpacks so many truths. You mentioned earlier about being named as an alternate for the 2018 Olympics, and I understand that made you think about quitting, right? And that's when you came back as a pilot. How do you know the difference between needing to quit and needing to begin again differently?
It's a great question. It's hard to really know when you're in that moment and you're feeling all the feelings. You're probably in a heightened state of emotion. So you're not necessarily taking the time to step back and look at the grand picture. You're just thinking here and now, how am I feeling? Okay, I'm going to make a decision based off of that. And sometimes
Mm,
you need that moment to kind of like feel the feelings, but then also allow yourself to step back and really think, okay, what am I doing here? What is the decision? What are the ramifications with going one way or another? I would love to sit here and say that I made that decision by myself. I certainly did not. I leaned on my support network,
hmm.
and there were people that I didn't even realize were part of my support network until they kind of crept out of the woodwork and said, hey, I'd love to sit down and chat with you. Let's talk about what you're
Mm,
going through. I've been there. And
hmm.
so having, these people come through and again, they were former athletes, they were current athletes, they were coaches on the team that didn't have the decision power to name me to the Olympic team. Having these individual conversations really helped paint a broader picture of what I could do. And
Mm,
ultimately, I knew deep down in my guts I did not want to quit, but it felt like the obvious option at that time just because of how I was feeling.
right.
But they really encouraged me to look at it from a different perspective of use this as motivation and fuel to come back even
Hmm.
stronger
Yes.
and to kind of basically show it to the people that they made the wrong decision. And
Hmm.
it's, I don't know, sometimes that gets termed as petty. I don't
Yeah.
see it as that, although
I
some
don't
people
see it as that
may.
either. Yeah.
Exactly. I think it's coming back and kind of like
It's giving
righting a lot of
yourself the
wrongs.
motivation, right? Like it's
Exactly.
the resiliency. If you can just give up and that's the easy thing to
It
do.
is the easy thing to do.
And it's not petty. It's how you take a quote unquote failure
Hmm.
and turn it into something great, right? Is by
Exactly.
using that as motivation to say I'm going to show them wrong. And that can be in a small scale of like a teacher thinks you're stupid, and so you're going to show them you can pass math,
Hmm.
front to, winning the Olympics or something.
Exactly. And so for me, it really boiled down to, well, there was multiple things. There was making, amends with myself that I knew what I was capable of, and I hadn't been given a true opportunity to showcase what I'm capable of. So quitting now would put an end to that. And I don't think I would ever be okay with myself because I love to live life without regrets. I
Mm,
hate the what ifs. It would drive me up the wall. And
right,
imagine if I sat, at the next Olympics in 2022 at my computer being like, man, what if I was there? What if I
right.
hadn't quit, right? So I didn't do that. There was the other side of it of bobsleigh is quite a diverse sport. It's probably the most diverse winter sport there is out there. That being said, at that time there were very few black pilots. You
Mm,
know, I could at the time probably count on one hand how many active black pilots there were at the time. And one of the athletes that I spoke with, former athletes I spoke with, was Shelly Ann Brown, who was the silver medalist for Team Canada at the Vancouver 2010 Games. She was a brake woman. And one of the things she told me was that she regrets not taking the opportunity to try being a pilot. And
mm,
I was just like, well, now I don't want to be saddled with that regret either. Of like, what if I didn't try that?
right.
So, luckily for me, a few months after the Olympics, there was a driving school down in Lake Placid, New York, and I signed up and I had a blast. And it helped me rediscover my love for the sport again that I
Mm,
thought was long gone, and I it
yeah.
basically helped me make my decision to come back. So I think to answer your question, it's not as simple as knowing when to give up and knowing when to forge ahead. It's very much you have to approach it holistically,
Hmm.
but be okay with the decision that you do make because whether you can go back or not, that's the path you're going to go on for now. And um, yeah, it required a lot of talking, a lot of thinking, a lot of tears,
Yes.
to finally make the decision to keep coming back and forge ahead and really come back on my own terms. I think that's the most important thing is at the end of the day that you come back and whatever decision you make, it's made on your own terms.
Hmm. You see that a lot when people have those like redemption stories where it's like, oh, it makes me think of that American figure skater that won. And she has like
Uh,
funky hair,
oh,
Alyssa.
Alyssa Liu.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
how she was like, if I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna do it on my own terms. And she won
Mm-hmm.
being
Yeah.
herself, right? And oh my gosh, I love that story.
Yeah.
So when you decided to become a pilot, that's like a different role than you would have played before. So
Mm-hmm.
did that teach you anything about like ego or humility or like rebuilding?
A little bit. So one of the things at the time that our sport had, and I'm going to speak about it from a Canadian lens, there was an inherent hierarchy that was
Mm,
built in our sport. Pilots are above brakemen, and to some extent that does exist to this day. But one of the things I promised myself when I became a pilot was that I was never going to reinforce that hierarchy. I never wanted
mm,
anyone who was sitting in the back of my sled to feel like they were less than me just because they were a brakeman and their role was perceived as lesser than. And so I wanted, and I still to this day create this environment of equalness. We are all on the same page. We are all on the same team. And I can't get anywhere without you guys.
mhm,
And I want you guys to understand that because for the longest time, brakemen were seen as disposable.
mm,
There was a saying, you're only as good as your last race. And so if you had, any perception that you were going to be kicked off the team, high likelihood you were. And so
right,
I don't have any power in that, but I always wanted my brake women to feel like anytime they were in the back of my sled that they were valued and
right,
that they weren't disposable. I wasn't going to kick them off for the next person that I thought, oh, that person happens to be better. It's like I really want this to be a team environment where we all are working together towards a common goal. And so that aside, when I switched from brakeman to pilot, the first thing you learn is that you're going to crash. And
mm.
it's going to be your fault because who else is controlling the
Right,
reins but
right.
you? And so becoming a pilot is a humbling experience, and I'm not saying that I wasn't a humble person. I feel like I'm a humble person. I've been told I am. But it really sets in play how important it is to make sure you know what you're doing. Because again, when you're learning how to drive, you can see what you're doing now, and you have control. You have the reins literally in your hands, and you also have someone's life in the back of your sled. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a responsibility that you really don't get taught. It's something that you become aware at some point. You're aware about it the entire time, but like I think the magnitude increases when you get your first real big crash and you're like, it's not just me I've hurt, it's someone else I've also hurt.
Mm,
And so you learn to be more respectful of the sport and the people that have now committed the time and effort to be in that sled with you, knowing that they are trusting you to get them down safely just as much as you are.
right.
So, yeah, there's just many things that you learn when you become a pilot. And some people learn that your ego should not be big, and some people do. I put myself in that latter category. I very much learned that my ego will not get me anywhere.
Mm,
Again, I don't feel like I have an ego. Some people may disagree, um, but I learned quickly how important it is to have that team aspect and feeling like everyone is valued. Because if one person starts to feel devalued, the whole thing falls apart. Like the
hmm.
foundation is going to crumble so
Yeah,
quickly.
especially from that team aspect, right?
And
Hmm.
especially on the women's side, because we don't have that four-man where everyone feels an
Mm,
opportunity that they will get a chance to race. In two-women bobsleigh, it is very vicious in the sense that everyone wants to race and everyone's trying to prove that they should be the one racing. When
right.
we go to the Olympics or when we go to a World Cup, World Championships, we will travel. And when I say we, Canada will travel with three pilots. Each one of those pilots will have two brake women that they will, interchange between races. But only one person's racing each race weekend. So that person who's sitting out on the sideline, they need to feel just as valued as the person who is racing.
Hmm.
But when it comes to the Olympics, we know that out of the six women that we brought with us, three of you will be racing and three of you won't. So it's really hard to build that team environment of like, we're all in this together because you might be the
Yeah.
one sitting on the sidelines, and it's hard to buy into a program when the only thing you're here for, or you feel like you're here for,
Yes.
is to race.
Especially when you're a high level athlete, because there may
Hmm.
also be other sports you could be doing too.
Exactly, right? Like
Hmm.
you're highly competitive and you're here in a sport that you love, and you could be at anywhere else. The beauty of bobsleigh is that we all for the most part come from another sport
Hmm.
that we've left to come to bobsleigh. And so when people aren't being given opportunities to race, they could easily go back to that sport, but they don't because they buy into the
Right.
values and the team goals. It still doesn't make it easier when you're not on the sled that race weekend, or let's say it's the
Yeah. Yeah,
Olympics
that
and
would
you're
be
on the
hard
sidelines.
regardless, right?
It's
Like, of
hard,
course.
right?
Yeah.
So it really is important to kind of build in that camaraderie of like, even if you're
Hmm.
not in the sled, you are just as much valued, if not more, because you're doing the harder job right now of not
Right.
being in the
And
sled.
and that resiliency becomes even more important, right? Because you have to talk yourself through being on the sidelines, and maybe
Hmm.
the next time you will be in a different position, right? I
Yeah.
often talk to women about that from like a career perspective, where I'm like, if you're passed over for a promotion or things like that, to continue to have a really good attitude about it.
Hmm.
I know for me personally, I tried to get it. It was the first time I had applied for a director role and I didn't get it. But I was very mature and I really supported the new person when they came in and I handled it really well. And the next time when that person left, I got the job. And
Hmm.
right, but if I had wallowed in my sorrows and been grumpy and mean and sad and you just it doesn't help either of you, right? And so
Yeah.
I feel like that attitude can go a long way.
Oh yeah.
Your favorite motto is every storm eventually runs out of rain. Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, so I don't know where I saw it. I came across it one time and I was like, man, that resonates with me so hard. Because you think about whenever you come through a thunderstorm and, in that moment, it seems very dramatic. And it is. It's,
Mhm.
thunder and lightning. It's not something you play with. But eventually that storm has to pass through and you get the sunshine, you get the blue sky. And it's
Mm,
not to try and say, what you're dealing with isn't important and, ignore it because eventually it'll go away. You still deal with it as it is when the storm's in place, you shelter in place or, you take precautions to make sure you're safe, but know that it's not the end of everything. Like at some point you will get back to the bright lights, the sunshine, and the great days that you've expected. And so I bring that philosophy into life where if I'm going through a hard moment, I allow myself to go through it and I, experience all the feels. But I also know in the back of my mind that I've been here before. I've gone through it and I will get through it again. And this hard moment is not going to last. It will
hmm
continue onward to, you know, move away from me at least. And then I can get back on track to what I need to focus on.
Yes, yeah, I think that's a great mindset. I want to make sure that I mentioned that you were on Jeopardy, which is very exciting, and you finished third. That is so impressive, Cynthia.
Yeah, I mean, I'm competitive, and so I was so disappointed with
Oh my
how I
gosh.
performed. It's like watching gameplay. I've only watched it one time since it aired, and I'm like, why did I get that question wrong? And you go on to like all these online forums, and all these former contestants say the same thing. It took them a while to get back to watching the show or watching their particular episode, and you beat yourself up when you get one question wrong. The one question I really got upset that I got wrong was the Tim Hortons question,
Oh
and it
no.
was about like what's in a double double. And I don't drink Tim Hortons enough, but I drink it enough to know what's in a double double, right?
Right, right,
And I instinctively went with what I order when I go get a double double, which is two milk, two sugar. But
right.
that's not a double double. That's two cream, two sugar. And I said it, and I was like, no, and then the cardinal rule they tell you backstage is if you get an answer wrong and they rule it as wrong, don't try and jump in to say the right answer because now you've just given your competitors the edge
Oh,
on what
right.
because like Americans don't know what a double double is. It's not a thing
No.
that they drink.
Yeah.
So when I said milk and sugar and they said no and I said, "Oh wait, no cream." The guy beside me was then he's like cream and sugar and then he got the point and I'm like,
Mm, yeah.
"You literally did the one thing they said not to do." That
Yeah,
being
so then you're
said,
mad at yourself for that.
yeah, and then you have
Uh,
to get right back into it because the game's still going on. It's not like they go, okay, commercial break now. It's like, okay, no, the next question's going on. I had a great time. The one thing I do realize though is I wasn't as prepared as I thought I was. I knew all the questions, even the ones that came up, and if you see, I was like buzzing so hard. The one thing I did not train for was that buzzer and how to
mm,
time it with when the question is read, the lights go up to let you know that it's time to buzz in. The guy who won the show, he had been practicing for months. He went and bought the buzzer
oh my
that they
God.
use and was practicing it, and I was just like, I didn't realize how intense this was. I just thought, you know what? I know all this information. I've studied up on American history and whatnot. I
Yeah.
thought I was good. And I realized I was quickly out of my own league because I had not practiced the one thing that they tell you is the most important thing, which is the buzzer.
Wild.
Yeah. And
Who
then
would have thought? You're not the only one, Cynthia. Who would
I
have thought? Because
know,
it
who would have
is supposed to
thought?
be about the knowledge.
Right. And so I afterwards I came home and I looked up the price of one of these buzzers and it's like 70 US dollars plus shipping. Altogether, I ended up buying it just because like my sister also loves the show and she
Like
wants
if
to
I
try her
ever
hand.
go back
If I ever
here,
go back, and so I'm like, okay, let me practice. It cost me $130 Canadian all told to finally get it here. And I was
you
just
have
like,
to do
this is
an event or something with it
I know I should. I really should.
now that you have it. Something else that you do outside of sport, but I'm sure related, is public speaking. And a lot of people listening host events with women and, arrange public speakers, I'm sure, in the work that they do. So, can you tell us a bit about that work before we jump into closing questions?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate as an athlete that I get to do public speaking and speaking engagements on the side, especially in the summertime. I'm very comfortable in that setting. I do fireside chats, Q&As. I've just gotten into to keynotes. I did my first keynote a couple weeks ago. That was
Congratulations.
exciting. Thank you. Super nerve-wracking, but that's my new foray now. And as an amateur athlete, a lot of us work full time or part time to supplement
Yeah.
our sport.
Hmm.
And this is how I supplement my sport is by doing speaking engagements, public appearances. So if anyone out there is listening and they're looking for someone to come and speak at their next event, I am your girl. Let me know.
Yes, very exciting. For women who are listening, who are maybe in their own storm, what is one action that you would encourage them to take this week to kind of begin again?
I I'm a big proponent of journaling. It's something that I've
Ah.
really tried to get into, even if it's not just like journaling in the sense of like, dear diary, da da da. Writing down your thoughts, because I think what I've gotten in trouble in the past is I let it ruminate in my head
Hmm.
and it does not solve the problem. Writing it down allows you to express it and then kind of leave it there, let your mind like write it down, and then in that moment, Kate, shut it down. No more thinking of it for now, no more ruminating. At a later point, you will come back to that, and then you can
Hmm.
come into it with a fresh mind of like, how do I address this issue moving forward? These are the points that I want to address, and you can go line by line with addressing the issues that are coming across. And then the other thing is honestly reaching out to your support network and your support system. The worst thing you can do is sit by yourself with it and not feel like you can work with other people to help you get through it. No man is
Hmm.
an island. We've heard that saying. And I have found that the best way I've been able to address issues is when I work with people who are there to support me. And I'm not saying get yes men. I'm saying get people who are there to champion your cause when you feel like you've been knocked down a couple of
Hmm.
steps or a couple
Hmm.
of pegs. They're there to help pick you back up, right? And
Yes.
hopefully you return that in kind when they're in their moment of need. But your support system is so valuable. You
Hmm.
can't do it by yourself. You're just going to burn yourself out. You're going to get more
Yes.
frustrated.
Yes.
You lean on those that care about you the most.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic advice. What's next for Cynthia?
What's next for me? Honestly, just more training and
Hmm.
getting back into
More
it.
work.
More work, and then, hopefully making the 2030 Olympic Games. Those will be my final Olympics for sure. Because I'm starting to get old and these knees are not as pliable as they once were. But it would also just be nice to kind of have a set deadline and then start putting in the pieces for what I want to do after sport versus getting to the
Yes.
Olympics and being like, okay, now what? I have nothing to
Yeah.
show
And you
for
have a
it. So
runway to prep for both, which is nice.
exactly,
Yeah. Oh,
exactly.
that's great. Well, I wish you the best as you're walking through that journey.
Thank
As we
you.
do some quick rapid fire, what's a rule you broke that turned out to be a great decision?
Ooh, what's a rule I broke? I I think one of the rules that I've broken was I like being comfortable. I think everyone likes being comfortable. I don't like being
Yes.
outside of my comfort zone, but going into bobsleigh was probably the biggest
Mm,
sense of going outside of my comfort zone I have ever done in my entire life. And I am so proud of 21-year-old Sin who decided to show up to a random combine at her university to try out bobsleigh because she had heard of it. And now, 15 years later, here I am living the spoils of all that hard work and that decision that I made back in
yes. To try something
2011.
new. I love
Try
that. To
something
step out of your
new.
comfort zone.
Yeah.
Can you name a woman that inspires you?
100% my mom. My
Mm,
mom is the reason why I was able to get into bobsleigh. She helped pay for my first training camp. She went into her savings. I was a broke
mm.
university student, and she went into her savings. And, like I said, we grew up in Toronto community housing, so there wasn't a lot of money to save up for. And she saw the passion that I had for this thing, and she's like, okay, here's the money. It was $2,000 to help pay for my first training camp, and I'll be forever grateful for her.
Oh, that's amazing. What is a book that has impacted your wisdom or perspective?
I am one of the worst readers out there, to
What
be
about a
honest with you.
podcast, if you can't
A
think of a book?
podcast. Okay, you know what? I'll go back and I'll say it's a book with there's an audio version of it, and the name escapes me right now, but I think it's The Obstacle is the Way.
Okay, we can
And
look it up.
it talks about it really relies heavily on like Marcus Aurelius, but it really talks about how the hurdle is actually the opportunity to get to where you need to be. Like if life were straightforward and the pathway was easy, like we would never really be successful. You kind of have to go through these hardships. And so the obstacle provides the pathway to where you need to go.
I love that. Yeah, it just
Yeah,
kind of flips it a bit.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Cynthia. There really is so much that listeners can learn. First of all, you're fun and you're enjoyable and you seem like a
You.
fantastic person, but lots of wisdom too, and that women can apply to their own lives. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Honestly, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us on Women Don't Do That. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating or review. Connect with us on Instagram at Women Don't Do That and visit our website www.womendon'tdothat.com for more details. Join our Patreon to support our work. Find all of the links in the show notes. Remember, you have the power to transform your what ifs into let's go. Together, let's redefine your possible. Until next time. The opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Women Don't Do That, Stephanie Mitton, or affiliated brands.